This is Garis, Masculist, MGTOW flyers. That is 2 3-page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 483, part 2, entitled The Fluffie Feminist Between Stage in History. Carrying straight on. When fluffy feminist divorce court lawyers and judges financially crucify and destroy the lives of one father in 4, they are merely continuing their traditional expectations of men, seeing men as cash machines to pay for women to have babies. When the divorce comes, as it does in half of marriages, who else is there to pay for the kids than the father? To these fluffy feminists who control the divorce courts, there is only one major difference between a marriage that is pre-divorce and one that is post-divorce, and that is that the father is no longer in the house. He continues to pay for the mother and the kids. This has been the traditional role of the father, and these fluffy feminist divorce court lawyer and judge women do not question it. They are fluffies at heart. They may be feminists, but are monoconscious. They know nothing about masculism, so in capital letters, by default, have traditional expectations of men. What they fail to see, however, are the awful consequences of their financial massacring of one father in 4, thus creating the circumstances for a sex war. In capital letters, things have to change. Here is where masculism comes in. Masculism is an ideology that is the obvious male equivalent to feminism. It's out to liberate men, to free men from decades of being manslaves to women, by pushing women very hard to fip up or be severely punished by men, by masculisted men, by not getting one. Forced to rot on the shelf, hence manless, loveless, sexless, babyless, and as masculist and MGTOW ideas infect the minds of the large majority of men, they will also be spat at, rejected, cast out as pariahs. Masculists aim to put a masculist group in every high school, every campus, so that young men are in a position to apply powerful moral pressure on fluffies to get off their fat parasitic asses and fip up, by bothering to get a career-competent education or pay a horrible price. If women continue to be fluffies, then that will be the kiss of death for them in terms of getting a man. As masculist ideas spread, millions of young men in the coming few years, now that we are coming out of the COVID era, will be viewing young women with a very cold eye, asking themselves, quote, "Is this potential girlfriend a fluffy? Will she be expecting me to be a manslave to her for decades of my life, and then drag me to a hated fluffy feminist-dominated divorce court, strip me of my kids, steal my house and half my wealth and stuff, and expect me to pay her alimony for the rest of her life because she was too parasitically lazy to get off her fat parasitic bum and fip up?" Question mark. "I have a hatred of fluffy manslaving parasites and will have nothing to do with them. I hope the social pressure on them to fip up, given that they have half a century career window, is so powerful that any woman stupid enough to be a fluffy deserves to be cast out of society, spat at, rejected, thrown out, as in the distant past, when a total bitch of a woman was cast out of the tribe to die in the wilderness." End quote. Masculists have a major program ahead of them. It took the feminists several decades to achieve the political goals they set themselves. It may be a similar story with the masculists. We masculists need to educate society that fluffydom is manslavery, and that manslavery is slavery, and hence something to be hated. We need to set up masculist groups in the high schools, and have thousands of older Masculists go to the high schools and teach young boys not to have relationships with fluffies, making them conscious that it is very much not in their self-interest, in their future lives, to be a manslave to a fluffy parasite for decades of his life. Masculists need to educate the media of Masculist ideas and how important they are to society, if society is not to wipe itself out, which it is currently doing due to the toxicity of the divorce courts taken over by the hated fluffy feminists. Masculists need to crush the monoconscious misandry of the monoconscious feminists, who are unaware of the fact that women oppress men far worse than vice versa, with their decades-long financial parasitism as fluffies, their decades-lasting gender crimes against men, with their paternity fraud, brackets, in about 5% of pregnancies, the husband is not the father, close brackets. Women's pill lying, where a woman wants to get pregnant, lies to her boyfriend/husband that she's taking the pill, but isn't. Gets pregnant as she wanted, then uses the law to force, capital letters, him to pay for a kid he doesn't want, thus manslaving him for decades. A major gender crime by the woman committed against him. It's to avoid such major gender crimes that the Masculists are pushing for the legislation of the PARA, that's paternity rejection right, which would allow a man to fill in a government paternity rejection form, so that if he refuses to be a father against his will, then if the mother continues with the pregnancy, then she is fully responsible for the costs of the kid. Masculists scream out at the massive injustice of the fact that women have the MARA, maternity rejection right, and men don't have the PARA, paternity rejection right, which is the most blatant form of sexist discrimination that exists, and it's not against women but against men. The principal political goal of the Masculists is not the legislation of the PARA, although it is one of the biggest, but the creation of a FIP society in which girls are raised, like boys, to be FIPs as adults by bothering to get a career-competent education so that they become FIPs as adults and pull their financial weight, not expecting to be a hated, fluffy, manslaving parasite. In a FIP society, women will be FIPs, so that on divorce it will be assumed that both divorcing partners are FIPs, so can earn their own money, so that in the case of the divorcing mother, she will not be expected to behave as a fluffy parasite of the money and labour of her divorcing husband. This is a critical point for the Masculists. It's one of the major reasons why Masculists place such emphasis on the FIPPing of women. Masculists want the divorce courts, as they currently are, that is, controlled by fluffy feminist hypocrite genociders, destroyed, to be made FIP, so that divorcing parents are assumed both to be FIPs, so that there is no financial dependence of mother on the father. The mother is expected to be a FIP and not a manslaving parasite off the money of a man. It will not be pleasant to be, a decade from now, for a young woman to be seen by her peers, especially by her male classmates, as being a fluffy crapper who has chosen to study fluffy crap majors at high school and college, so expects then to become a fluffy as an adult. She will have her life crushed around her. No one will want to talk with her. She will be cast out. This will destroy young women. So it is then expected that young women will pour into STEM, that's STEM, science, tech, engineering, math, and the professions, through fear of not getting a quality man, and hence then having to settle for an inferior, non-quality man's sperm for her kids, whom she will then have to raise herself, which will burn her out by the time she's 40. We Masculists are now intellectually armed with Masculist ideas, Masculist rhetoric. So when the time comes, in brackets, shortly, as COVID lifts, close brackets, we will be able to crush the monoconscious feminazi bigots with a steely resolve, making statements such as, quote, "We men gave you science-based medicine, a life expectancy of 85 years. So you have a career window of half a century, so you have to fip up, or we men will punish you severely by totally ignoring you, forcing your fluffy manslaving parasite genes to be removed from the gene pool, by forcing you to rot on the shelf, totally ignored by men, not even pumped and dumped by Masculists. So you will live a manless, loveless, sexless, babyless, socially ostracized life. You women oppress men far worse than vice versa. You fluffy feminists are hated by Masculists. You are seen as hypocrites, wanting equal rights in the parliaments, but rejecting equal obligations with men in sharing out the burden of earning the living, by not bothering to fip up, expecting to manslave some stupid, ignorant, gullible, manslavable man. But the supply of such men, thanks to the Masculists and the MGTOWs, is drying up. We Masculists are tired of your misandry, your hypocrisy, and lash back at it and crush it with Masculist ideas, Masculist rhetoric. It's in your self-interest to become biconscious by learning Masculist ideas, so that you become much less feminazi bitchy to men, due to feminism teaching you to hate men for the ways that men oppress women. But you women oppress men far worse. So as biconscious feminists, your feminist anger at men will be cancelled by your Masculist anger at women. So you'll be more approachable by men, and thus much more likely to have a boyfriend, instead of being a monoconscious feminazi bigot that men universally hate and punish by totally ignoring you, not even pumping and dumping you. You monoconscious feminazis have become indirect genociders with your takeover of the divorce courts. You have to be stopped, or you will indirectly wipe out whole populations. So, fip up, become biconscious, vote with men for the men fairing of the gender laws, or we Masculist soldiers will kill you. Look at the US Civil War, which was largely about the immorality of Negro slavery. Masculists see manslavery as a much bigger problem than Negro slavery, since there are billions of manslaves in the world today. So if you remain monoconscious, manslaving feminazi bigots, that's MFBs, there will be a sex war, worse than the US Civil War, and you will be shot in the streets by Masculist soldiers. This decade is our decade, the decade of men's lib, the Masculist decade, when men free ourselves from decades of manslavery to fluffy parasites. We Masculists want the divorce courts men feared. We want the para legislated. We want gender equality committees set up in the parliaments that consist half of female feminists and half of male Masculists, so that gender political issues of both sexes are addressed equally, which is far from being the case today. You monoconscious feminazi bigots, MFBs, will be forced to learn that gender oppression is not a one-way street, that in fact you women oppress men far worse than vice versa. You will fip up, or you will be manless. No calculus, no baby. You will pull your own financial weight and grow up. We Masculists are fed to the teeth with your childlike victim mentality. You will grow up, take responsibility for your own lives, or you'll be punished as fluffy manslaving vermin, and vermin are usually exterminated. We Masculists will exterminate you, slowly, by forcing you to rot on the shelf. If you don't want that, then fip up, grow up, take responsibility for your own lives, and become the type of woman Masculists do want to have relationships with. That is, become snurfs. That's S-N-U-R-F-S. That's slim, nurturative fips. Instead of the misandrous, man-dumping, feminazi bitches that you are today, whom men avoid like the plague. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. website, profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Author of the book Masculism, Men's Rebellion Against Being Manslaves to Women, an e-textbook of 480 plus Masculist flyers for men's studies courses. Freely downloadable in Microsoft Word format from my website. Ciao.